You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
It just seems like people should start looking at themselves as storytellers. Not like, I'm a TV guy, I'm a film guy, I'm a prose guy. You know, why pigeonhole yourself? Like, you got into this to tell stories in a certain medium, yeah, but if you're not a storyteller, hopefully you're going to go do something else with your life, you know? We got enough non-storytellers telling stories.
Hey everyone, thanks for hitting that play button. This is another episode of the Dave Bullis Podcast. Before I get to today's episode, I just want to mention briefly that Chris Gore from Film Threat Magazine and formerly from G4 is coming up on the podcast. His interview will be conducted on this coming Tuesday, which will be the 6th of September 2016, and it'll air a week from then. But if you have any questions for Chris or I for that episode, please send me a tweet. It's at Dave_Bullis or an email at dave@davebullis.com. Feel free to ask anything you'd like, and I will make sure to ask Chris if we have time. Chris is always an entertaining guy, and I actually met Chris about 6 years ago, maybe about 5 years ago, when I was pitching my TV pilot Game Over, which some of you have heard me talk about in the past. And Chris, we met on Twitter, and I started showing him the pitch packet, and he said this will be perfect for G4, but unfortunately G4 went out of business, so that pretty much ended that. But I still am always working about getting that TV pilot up and running, and I'm always concentrating now on rewriting the pilots. And that's something I've been working on off and on again, and just amongst the other scripts that I've been working on. Just a real quick funny story for you guys, and you'll appreciate this as listeners of the show. I had somebody recently contact me about helping them out with their project, and their pitch was, I can't offer you any money or points on the movie, but I'll give you credit for stuff. Well, as tempting as that sounds for me to work for free and to donate time and money to your project, that just doesn't cut it anymore. It's just some of these guys, even if you don't have money, there's other ways to help people out. Offer to help them on their project. Make sure you promote them on social media. Make sure you build this rapport with people before you just go to them and start asking for favors. The other day I had a guy on Twitter ask me if I'll donate to his project, and I looked at the project, and it was a complete thrown together mess. And I sent him the article I wrote for Alex Ferrari's indie film Hustle, which I'll link to the show notes, by the way, and he stopped tweeting after that. It was almost like I think he realized how far away he was, and he was just not going to get there with that current approach. So maybe I helped them out, but again, that the article I wrote for Alex Ferrari's indie film Hustle is a great resource, and I've actually heard a couple filmmakers have given me feedback on it, and they said this is phenomenal, and you did it for free too, which is even better, right? So I will link to that in the show notes. So if you are thinking about starting a crowdfunding campaign, please read that article. Speaking of crowdfunding campaigns, I have two guys on the podcast this week who are currently crowdfunding for their next feature film, Cactus Jack. It's about a guy who uses a podcast to vent his hate, and finally someone comes to silence him. And no, I know what you're thinking. It's not about me. This is episode 125 with guests Chris and Jason Thornton. Chris and Jay Thornton, I want to say thank you guys for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Man. What up?
So Chris, where are you at right now?
I'm in Fullerton, California, Orange County.
Cool. And Jay, where are you?
I am in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
So do you two live there permanently?
We kind of, have vagabond, or at least I do. Every few years we seem to kind of relocate and join up with each other. And and part again. That's been sort of our track record. I was out there in Milwaukee for a couple of years recently. Just all we did was crank material all day and night. But, one of the reasons we're running this crowdsourcing is because money, got tight. So I took a day job back out here in California for the time being until we can, turn things around or, we've got a lot of things cooking, but, we have to split any money we make in writing or filmmaking and, had some other unexpected expenses, that sort of thing. So I came back out to California to work a day job while we burn the midnight oil with this filmmaking stuff.
Cool. I wanted to actually ask that question because I wanted to ask, about, about your thoughts about, if you have to be close, out to LA to actually, sort of, make it in the film industry, because, I was reading your guys' bios, and you have some really cool projects in the works. But before I get to those, and maybe before we talk about all that stuff, I wanted to ask, just about your beginning in the film industry. So, did you guys grow up, making movies on like a family VHS or a Super 8 camera, or did you guys sort of enter the film industry sort of later on, maybe during college or something like that?
Yeah, it was definitely later. We grew up basically like welfare kids in DC and the projects, So we made comic books and made our own little action figures just out of paper and shit like that. But we didn't have access to cameras or anything to make movies. But we were definitely storyboarding movies, loved movies. Anytime we'd get the free promotional HBO for like a month, we tore that shit up, We'd watch Johnny Dangerously 9 times because it was in rotation or whatever. So, so yeah, man, we were always all about movies. And kids of the 80s, TV wasn't that dope back then. It was all about movies. So when we first started doing this thing, which we'll get to in a bit, we were totally into features. TV, not even interested at all, really. But the last 10, 15 years of TV are ridiculous. So once The Sopranos hit, The Wire, you start getting these production values that rival movies, especially for smaller stories if it's not effects driven. So
yeah,
TV definitely seems to be where it's at, and that's where we're headed now, and we're having most success currently. But yeah, it went from comic books and action figures, and like we would act out massive long form stories with our action figures. Like we got G.I. Joe still buried in the Philippines and shit because, yeah, that sounds crazy, but our mom married our stepdad as this Air Force guy who moved to the Philippines for a few years. But we'd play these long, drawn-out stories, and if a G.I. Joe got killed in our story, we'd play taps and bury him, and like it was
dead for good.
Yeah, we basically Game of Thrones that shit with our toys as kids. So long form felt like a natural progression to us, coming from features, loving features as a kid. It's like you bang your head against the wall for 10 years on features, and you're like, wait, we should have been doing TV the whole time, and now TV is ready for us as well,
Yeah, that's a question I hear a lot about is, they would say, hey, are you guys, are you doing TV? Meaning people asking me, like, are you doing anything for TV stuff? And that seems to be where everyone's going now because, that's the question. It used to be, if you're pitching in a room, it'd be, hey, what else you got? Now it's like specifically like, hey, do you have any episodic material?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the number of buyers is just astronomically larger, and new stuff's being added all the time, And Netflix, Amazon, they're making killer Emmy-worthy shit. So the paradigm's definitely changing. Network TV is going to be in trouble in the next few years, in my opinion. It's like audiences are too sophisticated for that kind of, advertising censored content. So we just think as these new things open up, it's going to help this resurgence where like independent film in the 70s was, content-wise, way darker, way more provocative, that is the internet, and a move away from advertising-based shit to subscription-based or just on-demand content's going to become way cooler as well, Some more kids coming up won't be as stuck on features like we were necessarily. It's like, now it's just looked at as storytelling, Most guys are we're writing prose as well. There's people making comic books and TV shows, and especially in this age of IP branding. So it's like, if you can write a novel or a series of novels, copyright that shit, sell the movie rights or option the movie rights or TV film rights, you retain copyright. You've got an IP that is attractive, hopefully you got to build it up, obviously. But so it just seems like people should start looking at themselves as storytellers, not like I'm a TV guy, I'm a film guy, I'm a prose guy. Why pigeonhole yourself? Like you got into this to tell stories in a certain medium, yeah, but if you're not a storyteller, hopefully you're going to go do something else with your life, We got enough non-storytellers telling stories. Right.
Yeah, very true. Very true, Jay. It's funny because I was just having a conversation with somebody about this, about creating, graphic novels. And he said that he, because he actually is in that business where he finds graphic novels to make into movies or to make into TV shows. And he actually said, I like 95% of the graphic novels he comes across are made because they specifically want them to be turned into movies and TV shows.
Yeah, it's like starting to eat itself and then oversaturated and all that. So, there's caveats to anything that we talk about with this shit. There's no rules. It's kind of a Wild West and really kind of always has been too, I mean, the corporatization of a certain aspect of it is taking that away. But the indie scene is alive and well. Technology's democratized the process, so people are making shit everywhere. It's just a matter of getting it in front of people, in front of an audience, and marketing becomes the big differentiator,
Right, and the studios and the corporatized side of it has all the marketing dollars, but it's a very limited bandwidth when it comes to creators. There's only so many studio movies made in a year, and
very reliant on sequels,
especially with streaming, Netflix and that sort of thing. Now there's a lot more opportunity. It's more niche, so. It seems that's the direction to push in as a creator for us, at least. Obviously we try and, continue to explore both sides, but it's just because, the studio system, there's a lot of high-level people that are competing for the same projects and everything, and we discovered that pretty quickly. And
yeah, right. It's kind of like we feel like we got late in the game. There was obviously that spec selling boom of like the 90s of Shane Black and Esther House selling his $1 million specs and everything, but those days are long gone. It's almost the converse of that now, where it's scavenging. It's kind of a wasteland because feature business has contracted. Studios are making less movies per year, but there are these kind of massive all eggs in one basket type movies, which mean not many jobs for writers. Now, again, there's this indie scene that's thriving, but the money, a lot of these deals to make a living off of it is going to be tough. And we're all about even just being part of a creative middle class that we hope emerges, that it's not broke or rich. That's what it seems to be for a writer, that we can get to a point where you can make 50, 60 to 100 grand a year as a screenwriter. That would be nice. But it seems like feast or famine,
I concur because, I've had people on this podcast before and, they were sharing that same, idea, can you, sort of work as a middle-class filmmaker and still make a living where it's not this case where, you say, well, I can't make a movie because I got to go take a day job that eats up all my time because that pays me, X amount of dollars per year. And you know what I mean? And they could try to make their movie, on sort of like doing the weekend thing. Hell, I've tried that myself. I haven't had a lot of success with that.
It's brutal.
But,
it's brutal, man.
Yeah.
It's, because you want to pay people too. So obviously, again, we'll talk a bit about this film or crowdfunding here. We have had some success, but we're not made of money. And it's something Chris was alluding to earlier. When you're a team like us, that means you got to split whatever fee you get. And they're not paying you twice for your script because there's two of you, if that's the case, let's bring on a third, right? Yeah. But so we end up having to split it, and then you got to commission out 10% to your agency, 10% to your manager, 5% to your attorney. So at the end of the day, it's like that old Cosby Show episode where Cliff gave Theo like $500 and he thought it was all the money in the world, and he's like, well, where are you going to live? Yeah, I'm going to get a nice apartment. I'm going to get something downtown. All right, he takes 2 bills, Oh, you want a nice car? Yeah, it takes another bill, whatever. That's the life of a in-the-trenches screenwriter. To get vested for medical with the WGA, all those kind of things, it takes continued success.
So each project is a new hustle, like we've had many false starts and things just caught up in development and that sort of thing where, it paid little or nothing. So, if it's just each time you get a win, okay, you've got that now. And if it becomes a film and, you get a percentage of the budget, maybe some box office bonuses and royalties, that's great way down the road. But so many things just get caught up in development hell. We've got a number of them that are outside our control now. We fulfilled our obligation of completing the script on time, et cetera. And then it's just kind of languishing.
And for no one's fault. A lot of times it's just scheduling.
It's just the nature of
scheduling is
yeah.
a bitch.
Yeah, absolutely. But, just wanting to, find the best path to actually getting something that when people ask us, have you written anything I can see, we would do it ourselves. But again, it takes money and thus the crowdsourcing. But
right. Like the goal for all of us creatives is to make a comfortable living doing this creative thing we love. So this movie we're making, Cactus Jack, it's not something we're making as a money-making venture,
No.
Like anyone who's giving money, any accredited person, even who would give you money at that micro-budget range, you have to make it perfectly clear to them, look, this is a movie, you can't expect a return on your investment, So you're going out trying to sell this thing where you got to kind of hamstring yourself up front. You got to warn people pretty much legally that this shit probably won't make their money back. So what a way to ask for money. That's why so many films end up crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is a beautiful thing, but the problem with it is it becomes this case where you're crowdfunding into an echo chamber where all your friends are aware of it, and you got 30 days of just beating the same drums. So you got to try and branch out this exposure, this network of yours. Not easy to do, especially in a world where everyone is trying to do the same thing. Yeah. So I think there's total crowdfunding fatigue. So we're extremely grateful to all the help we have gotten so far. We're very curious to see what comes out of this campaign. We got a few other things up our sleeves in addition to talking to people like yourself. And the smart thing to do is not to invoke Donald Trump, who I'm sure will get talked about later when we get into Cactus Jack, but his show, The Celebrity Apprentice. I've watched a few episodes, and it seems like the people who win are the ones who got a Rolodex where they can call up Mr. X and say, I need you to buy a hot dog for $50,000 or whatever, So even if you're crowdfunding to try and get out to the masses, yes. But in this day and age, again, of fatigue and GoFundMe, where some people are like, hey, maybe I should give to my neighbor who needs a kidney instead of this dude who wants to make a fucking movie, So there's all that competition for your dollars, but smart to also focus on some quote-unquote whales that you might know. And either they can give you the money off the books, so you don't even kick Indiegogo or Kickstarter, whoever it is, a percentage of that money. They just give it to you. But again, you got to be careful with looking at that as an investment or something, There's SEC violations. When we first set out to do this thing, we're just like, hey, we're going to sell shares of this movie, and that's going to give you a certain return on investment. And we asked our attorney if he could write up just some basic boilerplate forms for that, and he was like, I'm not touching this shit. Because come to find out, there's all these SEC? SEC, yeah. I start thinking college football when I say that. Like, no, Wall Street. So all these regulations about investors having to be accredited. I don't know at what budget point they start to look or give a shit. If you're making a $5,000 movie, I don't know if the IRS is going to come after you or the SEC or whatever, but maybe if you were getting millions from hedge funders and then you just never make the movie or whatever, some kind of scam artist.
Yeah,
like use a crowdfunding campaign,
Yeah, like a nice money laundering scheme. But basically, Indiegogo is going to start getting into equity crowdfunding.
Yeah.
So this, and basically, the whole accredited investor thing is what's holding that up. It is going through though, and the whole accredited investor is they have to be worth $1 million, right. not including their house, and that's right. The whole thing. So now though, but in the future, you guys can make a movie, I can make a movie, and we could actually sell shares legitimately for whatever amount of money to hopefully, as long as it's on like something Indiegogo or whatever, it's something that it would be nice and legal for everybody.
Yeah. Which is great. And we thought about waiting until that point happens to make a feature, but this movie we're making is so timely. It's like so centered around this political circus and everything that's happened recently that we got to just make it now. So we'll make another feature someday with equity crowdfunding for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I did it because when I saw the trailer for Cactus Jack, I actually really I saw that I was like, this does resonate well with what's going on right now, and even if you were to make this movie like meaning even if you were to crowdfund this movie like next year, for instance, I still think it would be timely, and the reason would be you could play with a lot of different things. I don't want to say too much. I want to I'll let you guys actually talk about the movie, but I don't want to say too much about it.
Yeah, there's definitely, first off, in the way you structure the film, you could do that. I mean, who knows what's to come out of this insane, again, circus that this whole process has been. But we are kind of building the outcome of the movie around the outcome of the election. So it's going to have that kind of hanger for it.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so like we're gonna shoot live with our actor, who's a fucking madman, by the way. Like, you guys, that trailer is the tip of the iceberg. That's a teaser that just shows you tonally pretty much what's gonna go down, But this guy is all in, like eating the spider, did it, stuck his head down in that disgusting toilet, did it. Like, he's in, and he's just insanely talented. This undiscovered gem out in the Midwest, Michael Gall. What up? Where the fuck was I going? I get caught up.
Well, we're just we're going to record him. That we're going to record his live reaction in character to the election results.
Yeah, we're going to be in the basement election night, all through the night, as Jack, paces and takes in this election live. So it's going to be crazy. And depending on how, we've got outcomes worked out for each scenario of who wins. The differences might be somewhat subtle in the moment, but maybe they'll play out differently towards the very end of the movie. It's kind of funny. Here's the thing, too. When you write in Hollywood, there's so much overseeing and so much control of the content as far as notes, development notes, drafts, passes, this and that. Part of the reason we wanted to make this film in this totally indie micro-budget way is to step away from all that and just make some shit and say, like it or don't. This is what we're about. Like it, hopefully. If you don't, whatever. But this is us. We still got some artists in us in that sense. But, so the outcome of the movie, this whole thing has been kind of choose your own adventure book for us as well. The actor can just go off the cuff in character as Cactus Jack. He's not at all a fucking creep like Jack. He's just an amazing, gifted character actor, essentially. Right.
And the beauty too. Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, he has a stand-up background where he's done all this crazy character work. Like, he has a flesh mask serial killer character that does stand-up. Is like this redneck Ed Gein type thing. It's amazing shit. But really provocative, really out there, really pushing the envelope. And the first time we brought him down into our little secret lab to even talk about making this project, we just put a mic up. He said, I had this bit that I was thinking about, but I didn't really want to do it because I didn't believe what it's saying, but it's a good bit. And he spit out this thing about Muslims and Muslim garb. And, if you watch the teaser, you'll see what kind of dude Jack is. So imagine him and what he would have to say about Muslims and Muslim garb, right? So we filmed this thing just off the cuff. It was amazing. And we brought the character to life. This has been like a year and a half we've been working on this thing in the background. And we created the character, did like method social media shit where he had his own Twitter account, his own Facebook page, and I would go tweet the most heinous shit I could think of as Cactus Jack. He'd see whatever news item was hot or trending, tweet about it, and really just vile, racist, misogynist, xenophobic shit. Kind of our worst nightmare. We talk about him like Stephen Colbert on bath salts. That's kind of what we're up to with this character. So we start creating this landscape of all this crazy hate and shit popping off, and then we put out a couple of these videos that Gall made, even the first one that we just recorded, like I said, randomly off the cuff, and it started getting likes and garnering all these likes from all these political creeps out there on these Facebook groups and getting shared. It was terrible. And then the Pulse nightclub shooting happened. And we had this big, like, conscience, I guess, check, you know? We're like, should we be doing this shit? Should we be inciting anything in these times, you know? Just this stunt with this character, this social media experiment. So we totally backed off that, back to the film. Now we're going to make a good fucking movie, you know? Oh, that's kind of gimmick anyway. It's interesting and it's fun, but at the end of the day, this is about making a movie. So peeled back from all that, put out this statement about what we were doing and why we're stopping it, which we could share to you. Maybe some of your listeners will want to check it out. And peeled it all back, and ever since, we've just been back to what we maybe should have been doing in the first place, as interesting and revealing as that was. But one thing that did do was it let us know that we were onto something, that this is a zeitgeist film, that this shit is out there. There's this maelstrom of all this hate and intense, polarized political shit going down that Jack totally taps into. And like you were saying, I think will last for a few years at least, because I think we're witnessing probably the most outlandish election that we'll ever see in our lifetime. You know, this Trump thing is just thrown it into complete absurd theater of absurdity, basically, you know?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because when I saw the trailer, I thought, you know, minus the political rants, an angry man who has a podcast. Hell, you guys could have made a movie about me.
Perfect. Had we known you earlier.
Yeah, you just
Are
yeah,
you,
just rant
let
on the
me
radio.
just ask you: are you willing to eat a spider?
Dude, I eat that. I eat a spider every day. Come on, Chris.
Well,
Come on, Chris.
Check this out, though. Here's something interesting we've tried to do, too, because once we get away from that whole Hollywood way of movies are made, that it's kind of this assembly line and this is the way it works, we're like, there's no fucking rules. We're back to the days of F.W. Murnau or whatever, D.W. Griffith. Like, here's a camera. Let's try and tell a story with it, you know? No one came before. There was no way to do it. We're kind of just, can we go back to that, you know?
Part of the beauty of this is that we aren't burning film anymore. You know, like the system that's in place where you have to lock the script down and everything. You know, much of that possibly came to be because, you know, set time was precious. Like money was just going down the drain every minute, and you were eating up film. But now the tools are different, and we can just shoot hours of Cactus Jack ranting and having various guests on. Well, we plan to involve a lot of other people as voice actors to call into his show, friends and enemies of Jack's, you know.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was about to get to when he said, if you guys had known me, because, well, go ahead. You can finish.
Just go ahead.
Yeah, like Chris was saying, we were at one point discussing also making this really interactive movie. This is kind of what I was speaking about, where there are no rules, the way it's done conventionally, that we could cast this movie as we virally market it. What if we start putting out snippets of what Jack is up to, what he's saying, and ask for people to respond, either as they would if he were a real character, I think taking away that whole ruse that we had going before, which was dangerous and irresponsible, but to just say, all right, we're making a movie, here's our character, what would you say back to him? Or play a character and respond to him, because there's going to be this section of the movie as his podcast and his show grows from just him leaving unseen YouTube videos to him having a live show where he's taking callers and everything, you know, that there's going to be this section where it's him putting out these videos and people are responding in video form. You know, you see those YouTube arguments go back and forth with people posting clips. So we still might kind of crowdsource our cast as well, which, you know, anyone who wants to be an actor, get a credit in a movie or whatever, they could respond to one of these videos we put out. Maybe if we dig it, it's something we could either take and expand on creatively or just use it as is if it works, sign a release, whatever. And, you know, people listening right now or yourself, I was getting at, could end up in the movie if you were interested, you know?
Oh, that's a really good idea, Jason. You know, I think, you know, even in just, I was actually looking at your crowdfunding campaign, and I was wondering if that was even a perk, like if there was a perk or two, you know, where somebody could be a caller just to, you know, record something and even just, you know, send it in and just see, you know what I mean? Like if they contributed, like, I don't know, $100. I'm just pulling a number out of the air.
I totally was discussing that with our managers also. One as a producer the other day. I got to look, because it's something that we had discussed but didn't nail down before starting the crowdfund. I got to look at Indiegogo and see if we can add a perk at this point. I don't know. The people who have invested, some of them might say, I would have done that, so it might get tricky. Like, I wish we had just done it up front. But
we plan on
I
inviting.
think
Well, we actually kind of plan on inviting anyone to do that, that we could, we will vet it, of course, but we actually do have just kind of an open door for any. So it's kind of an interesting, debate as to whether if you have a tier that's the reward, yet we're doing it with a bunch of other people that didn't pay the money. Is that fair to the person that paid the money to do it?
Right.
Just, you know what I mean? So it gets a little complicated, but yeah, like Jay said, we kind of have an open door to anyone that's listening to this or, that, and checks out the campaign. If they object to something Jack says, or
which they
scary thought that they agree with them, yeah, and like so, part of this whole story is that Cactus, just from his mom's basement, ends up getting viral himself, going viral, and we plan to have a sequence where you see just all these response videos coming in. So we'd like to just have like a chain of those that we could put to use. So that would be very cool, so that people can see themselves in the movie for a couple seconds where they're just like, pointing a gun at the camera at Jack,
And we could definitely, and we have scripted up some of these exchanges and characters, but we're really at a point where like, let's just get gonzo and crazy with this shit. All right, we're making a movie, we're asking for $20,000. Some of that will be rolled over into post, depending on what happens. This movie will need some post work for sure to get it's a movie built on audio. There's some minor effects work with these old broken TVs down in the basement that occasionally flicker to life. There's some Oliver Stone type touches and homage for sure. But for the most part, it's such a cheap movie and so underground that like, let's, in the spirit of that, make the movie gonzo shit. Let's do some digital Herzog kind of thing, using social media, casting off of social media, and that also will give us some authenticity.
Yeah.
And,
as I was watching the trailer too, that's exactly what I was thinking too. Is this looks like a good way to tell a story? And I noticed even in your Indiegogo write-up, you said we did the Rodriguez list. The Rodriguez method, where you figured out what you had access to, and you built the movie around that. That's actually a really good idea. That I'm glad that I'm seeing some filmmakers like Paranormal Activity, even the new movie Don't Breathe. It looks like they took it in a house, but it's a creative way to tell that story.
Right, you
know what I mean?
You can tell a million stories in one room, with one person.
And it's beautiful. It's like you ever seen Lars von Trier's The Five Obstructions? There's something obstructionary about it that makes creativity come to the fore when you're telling this story. Or I'll use some quotes like Orson Welles, I think, something to the effect of, a lack of limitations, or limitation is the lifeblood of art, I think it was, right? So the fact that you have this limitation, you have one location, and in our case, one actor, how compelling can you make this? I think we definitely are onto something. We're going to have an insane movie you're going to be talking about when you come out of it. But that's the challenge. And I would watch a million of those movies. Linklater's Tape, amazing fucking movie. Right. It's for the most part two dudes in a hotel room.
Meanwhile, the big blockbusters that have no limitations, they have a huge budget, and the A-list actors and everything. Half the time, those aren't even that great as they turn out.
Right.
At least to us, we find the more constrained and restrained sort of storytelling more interesting, partly because of the limitations, especially when in the perspective as filmmakers.
Right. And again, it's such a low budget, so little risk. We can be way more provocative as far as just pushing buttons, having Jack say shit that would never get through any development process. So, the trailer itself, Hollywood would never put that Red Band trailer out. So the teaser, I'll call it. It's not a trailer, but
yeah, very true. They would, they would never put something like that out, which is why I love the outlet of independent film. Guys like us, guys like other people I've had, on the podcast, guys and girls, sorry, but I've had on the podcast, and just making the films that we would want to see. And I'm glad. I think Jay, you brought this up, just the films of the '70s and that creativity. You know what I mean? I was just talking to a friend of mine about 2001: Space Odyssey, and how when that came out in theaters, it was actually the teenagers who who went to see it, who were who started that sort of drumming up some word of mouth publicity for it, because they went to go see it. And he said, Dave, how many teenagers nowadays do you think could sit through that whole movie?
Right.
Yeah, man.
And
the attention span's much shorter now.
This is something people don't talk about that often, but Chris was talking about shooting digital versus film and how it's not precious or anything anymore. And with that, we've gotten massive coverage, music videos. Look at them since digital shooting started. That now you're getting massive coverage because you're not spending all the money on film, so fuck it, shoot everything. And then you get quick edited content that's boom, 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 boom. And the content itself is so fast and so much that it might be contributing to the whole ADD phenomenon or whatever, the lack of a attention span on the part of the youth. And even myself, I find myself over the last few years a little more antsy when I'm watching stuff, I watch an old movie and it hits you again. Like I plugged in Jurassic Park, the original one, like a year ago, and I was like, holy shit. It looks kind of dated, but it's because the camera's put in one good smart spot. It's like economical and efficient. And if that's dated, I don't know, maybe we're getting into some weird territory where economy of storytelling isn't being taken into consideration as much, because you can just get so much material, so much content, mash it all together, which is cool. Don't get me wrong. There's some great pastiche work that's done. Again, we love Oliver Stone's mixed media type shit, and that's old school. He was doing that on film, which is really fucking crazy. Mm-hmm. But there's something to be said for that kind of film, but that should be your intent. You know what I mean? Artistically, that should be trying to disorient you or whatever. But it seems like that's just the standard now, to fly by, to get to the commercial break if it's TV, or to just hit the next set piece if it's a movie, and everything's in such a rush. You don't get too many movies that kind of take their time on a big scale. Smaller movies, definitely. They're out there. They're just hard to find.
Yeah, I concur, and that's interesting. You got me thinking now about that. About the economies of storytelling, and I mean, and also I've had people on too discussing digital versus actual film stock, and there is pros and cons on both sides. But you're absolutely right. Like you and Chris touched on, where it is with digital. Now people are like, what? Let's just shoot everything. And you know what I mean? Like, well, it's kind of like what David Mamet always said. Where the fuck do you place the camera? Well, now it's kind of like, well, who cares?
Right.
We'll just shoot from every angle possible, right?
And again, more choices in post,
There's no rules either. Like, Werner Herzog is a fucking total idol of ours. He's like, fuck storyboarding. Storyboarding's bullshit. You should just go in, look around, feel inspired to put a camera in a certain place or whatever. That's a different thing than getting 6 cameras on something and getting massive coverage and editing up every angle of the explosion and shit. You know what I mean? Like, these old movies, it's like, that's our money shot. This is our explosion. We better get this shit right. Now they just slap 20 digital cameras around and get it from every angle and cut it, which they used to do some of that, even like old Van Damme movies. It's like, whoa, he just did a jump kick, but he hit him 3 times. Like, what the fuck is that? But it feels like older movies from the 70s and prior didn't do that. That was like something that came out of the 80s, and eventually with digital really got crazy.
Yeah, I remember there was a still image, I think from a John Woo film, and I forget which one, but they had like, my God, it must have been like 15 cameras, and it was all capturing one explosion.
Right.
And I mean, they were like, because I'm sure they were like, look, we got one chance at this. We better make sure we got enough coverage of this damn thing.
Mm-hmm. But the thing also comes in, they say there's 3 movies, the one you write, the one you shoot, the one you edit. So in editing, pick the best angle of the explosion. See, it's like it comes down to intent again. There's this great line in Wonder Boys where, in the movie, I'll say Katie Holmes' character is talking to Grady Tripp, played by Michael Douglas, about making choices. Remember you told me that writing is about making choices? Well, this book you're writing, it seems like you didn't want to make any choices. And you can maybe, I'm not going to try and shit on John Woo. John Woo's awesome. And when he did that, that was innovative, to a degree. I seem to recall Cassavetes' head exploding in the Fury, shit like that.
They mentioned that.
Right. They've used multiple angles because they're like, we got to get this shit right.
It's a money shot.
CGI totally takes that away, where you got to get this practical effect right in one shot. But, I don't know. I keep trailing off.
Well, I think like there is like it's a good balance, and it's nice to have both, where you go in with intent you know the shot you want, ideally. At least you want to put thought into that and have that kind of defined. But then when you go to actually shoot, you're just kind of, I think it's smart to just, get as much coverage as you can if it can be cheaply done. And then when you go to editing, you have more options. But yeah, it still boils down to, as storytellers, it's intent driven, so like, and often, it's a big debate of like, is there only one place the camera could be? Probably not. There's probably a bunch of places it can be and do the job just as well. So the intent more is what the tone you're going for and what the scene's supposed to be doing storytelling wise and narratively and all that. And then, if we've got multiple options in the editing room of, which the best version of that was,
But our favorite,
definitely not a bad thing.
I mean, I think we will have instances in this movie where it goes gonzo. I mean, depending on what we can pull off a budget, we'll throw in a crazy, again, Natural Born Killers or Kill Bill style animated sequence of Jack just going ape shit, with some Ralph Steadman-esque animation or something, if we can get the budget. If not, it's going to be Gall doing it, obviously, shot from whatever angle, framed however we choose to do it.
Or
yeah, maybe we'll throw in a puppet. Who knows? There's no rules, right? Some gnarly handmade puppet.
We talked about it.
Yeah. We do own a set of chattering teeth. Shit could come in handy. But
well, I wanted to ask guys, also speak, as we talk about, this film, I wanted to ask, where did the name Cactus Jack come from?
It's an old expression. That it just generally just means a prickly individual, but we had a friend who did a little drawing for us that was named Cactus Jack, and we always liked it.
Yeah, he just gave us this random drawing he had made years ago, I think.
Yeah.
He just had it sitting around. He's like, I want you guys to have this. And, so we got friends who just give us weird shit sometimes, which is cool. Because then, hey, now we got a whole movie title out of it. But it was this character called Cactus Jack, and it just sounded perfect. Jack is that whole Wolfman Jack it evokes, with the radio, the voice, Jack Nicholson, just that edge, Jack Kerouac, London, there's so many great Jacks. And then the cactus part being, my, we're a prickly one, aren't we, Jack? That's the sentiment. So it just seemed perfect. And then we started looking into it because anyone we brought it up with, we're not big wrestling fans. People would be like, what about Foley, man?
Mick Foley? What?
You're going to get sued and shit. And we're like, well, yeah, let's go look this up. So we look it up, and yeah, it's kind of an old colloquialism to mean somebody with a prickly disposition. Our 32nd vice president, I'll have to look his name up again, was nicknamed Cactus Jack. And there's a Kirk Douglas movie, The Villain, from 1979, that his character's named Cactus Jack in it. And I think in Australia it was released as Cactus Jack. But I think we're in the clear as far as legally using it. And it's just perfect. It fits this guy to a T. It's great.
It'll be an awesome Wikipedia page to have Mick Foley, the wrestler, the 34th president, and our film's character. All,
right. And then we start to think, well, this WWE thing, anyway, again, we're making this gonzo little film no one knows about. Why run from any association like that? Maybe if it gets on demand and somebody's following it through on their Xbox and they're a WWE fan and they say, Cactus Jack, what the fuck is this? And they stop on it and then check it out. They're like, oh, I'll check it out. So
yeah, because that I want to ask you, because I used to watch wrestling as a kid. I used to be a huge wrestling fan, but now I'm all in the movies. But yeah, I remember Cactus Jack and like WCW and stuff. But yeah, it's just funny. Yeah, I think you guys would be in the clear because honestly, man, when I created my own film production company and I called it Iron Fist. Mm-hmm. And this attorney friend of mine was like, Dave, are you insane? She goes, there's a Marvel super character named Iron Fist. Do you own the rights to that? Blah, blah. And I said, if you look at the logo, it's clearly based off of Shaolin, like Iron Fist training, which has been around for thousands of years.
Exactly.
They based it on something that existed already. Yeah.
Yeah. So I said, if they want to try to sue little old me, and for nothing at all, go. But and then my other attorney friend was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. He's like, don't listen to she's just being overly cautious. And I think you guys would be in the clear as well.
Hey man, I'm like, fuck it, sue us. Donald Trump with his 800 lawsuits will probably sue us after this shit comes out, so that'll be good publicity. Like Jack's whole, I mean, I don't know how political you want to get. We don't give a shit. In our world here, Jack, his whole vibe is he's a Trump fan. He's rooting for Trump, not because he at all believes in the democratic process. He thinks our whole democratic process is a shame, you know, but because he thinks if Trump wins, it's going to usher in this great race war. And that's what he's after, you know. So, again, very provocative, nasty shit, but we love those kind of movies. Like, you ever see that old Ryan Gosling movie, The Believer?
Yeah.
Yeah, like no one talks about that movie when they talk about Ryan Gosling, but that had a little Travis Bickle to it, you know. Some of the best movies got the Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, you know. Yeah. They're so compelling because it's a horror movie. Mm-hmm. And that's where this is kind of a political horror movie, I guess you could call it.
And Chris, you just touched on it too. You know, it's a character study, and there's one thing that I've learned. Being not even just being a fan of movies, but writing my own movies and digging deeper and all this stuff and seeing what's underneath and why we find things so fascinating. It always comes back to character. You know what I mean? And I think and I think in some of the big budget blockbusters, I think they put the sort of spectacle and over character and everything, and it just and characters like in the backstory. A movie I was trying to talk to you about the other day about why it failed was Sucker Punch. Have you seen Sucker Punch?
I've seen not all of it, and yeah, that's probably right. I had to check out halfway through it, if halfway.
Yeah, and this, because I was watching it with somebody, I was trying to explain to her, why this movie failed, and I was saying, there's a shot where this girl, she goes into this like dreamlike state, and there's like some kind of like giant samurai guard after her, and he hits her with a sword, and she goes flying literally thousands of feet into like a temple. The temple, she goes through the wall, through the concrete wall, lands on the like altar, breaks that. She gets up. There's not a freaking scratch on her. And I said, you see, they took away all the tension of the entire scene because now we know she's indestructible. So there's no tension because we don't care anymore.
Right. And that case is interesting. That actually is hilarious because that's the exact moment where I was like, all right, fuck this movie and turned it off. But it's interesting because you can't blame spectacle for that. She could have flew through a wall and ended up flying into a family and killing a baby or some shit, and stakes are there, and it's just when spectacle's all you care about. That's the problem with some of these big movies. It's like, why not have good character shit in there too? Why not? Right. What are you doing?
Are they mutually exclusive?
They're not. And we've always argued that. We haven't had real much exposure at the studio level because even in our successes in Hollywood, mainstream Hollywood, it's more provocative stuff again and not tentpole 4-quadrant material. Like with Cactus Jack, we're making a movie for grown-ups. We're not trying to get the whole fucking family in here. This is for grown-ups or European kids. But,
guys,
go back to spectacle. Like you can make a crazy we've written crazy super character-driven spectacle movies. They just don't go anywhere, and part of it's this whole global audience thing. It seems like that character really, they don't want to do anything too specific. You know what I mean? You start getting into character, you're getting the specificity and detail. That's the beauty of character.
It gets lost in translation.
Idiosyncrasies and everything. And then it's like, though, is this the guy I want to root for? If you give them no personality at all, but a task everyone can get behind, they're hoping everyone roots for the guy, But as soon as you start giving them a personality and an identity, it might get dangerous as far as everybody rooting for him. But I come from the old school of thought, Chris does too, of course, that if you try and please everyone, you end up pleasing nobody. So just make something cool and specific and detailed and rooted in some authenticity, and you'll get a small, ardent fan base versus pleasing everybody. Now, obviously, fan base to them is dollars. They want revenue, right? It's always about business. So again, when you make a movie, it's such a small budget like us. It's not this huge budget and marketing campaign that you have to recoup.
So it's as if they're filling different roles. Like the big tentpole movies are more like amusement park rides.
Truly.
They're more just like thrill rides. And meanwhile, the kinds of movies that, obviously we gladly take the money and write something like that. But, what we find more compelling as just, fans of film and storytelling in general ourselves is the stuff that's, more character-driven, compelling, provocative.
Right. I mean, someone just hit me with that thing on Facebook of post a poster of your favorite movie or a movie you love or whatever, I don't know if you've seen this shit going around. And I'd done one before, but I just did one for Love, Liza. I mean, Love, Liza with Philip Seymour Hoffman is completely the antithesis of Wrath of the Titans 2 or whatever, you know what I mean? Yeah. So that's the kind of shit we're attracted to. But our whole dream on the Hollywood side, we start getting studio love, our TV show we're working on takes off or something like that, and we J.J. Abrams it back from TV to features, would be to take that challenge and try and make a super character-driven movie with pathos and all that pretentious shit that has possibly big budget spectacle set pieces,
We would love to get our hands on Clash of the Titans and do it our way,
Right, or Masters of the Universe.
Just as an example, since you mentioned Wrath, but we love that kind of stuff, but it's just that the way it's being executed today is just this one version of it that's, again, more of an amusement park ride, like I said.
Well, we talk about
it's very character driven.
Here's something about us specifically too, and our background is, again, we grew up kind of unsupervised, and we'd get that HBO shit, and we'd watch whatever R-rated movies. Like I watched The Killing Fields and The Exorcist probably when I was 5-6 years old, So we had this very grown-up foundation even for storytelling. So when we played with our He-Man toys, we told, again, Game of Thrones level epic,
shit got gnarly,
dark, fucked up shit, Maybe not as much incest at that age, but definitely some backstabbing and killing, and characters were gone for good. And again, TV now, it's kind of why we shifted over there. You talked about character, and character is much more focused on in TV. It's character pretty much is the name of the game, Of course, you want to hit people with cliffhangers and all that, but...
And another notable thing about the difference between feature and more long-form TV serial storytelling is when it comes to character in a film, you only get an hour and a half to get to know the person and care about them, or at least care about what the stakes are or what have you. And then, it resolve itself. The story resolve itself. Whereas in the long-form storytelling, you have time to, like most people, as Jay and I talk about, sometimes don't usually arc in a narrow amount of time, just because of this one event or whatever. Oftentimes it's more of a long form change, through some experiences, and that's one thing that I love as a storyteller is just a character changing, but in subtle ways often, not so much just this moment they woke up and... Yeah,
that's the thing about movies that feel kind of inauthentic, because like Chris is saying, we do talk about this all the time. If you want to talk nuts and bolts storytelling shit, we kind of hate character arcs, transformative arcs, which in Hollywood development especially seems to be something that gets shoehorned in all the time. It's kind of this Blake Snyder save the cat kind of way of storytelling where, yeah, it's easy. Audiences can easily consume it, but it feels so false so often. There's so many movies I love until the third act, and then it shoehorns in or ham-fists this transformative arc. The character had to do this 180 to achieve his goals or whatever. And it's like, in life, sometimes maybe a car crash or death of a loved one or going to war or something like that, one isolated incident can change you. Usually not for the better, which is funny.
Right.
Movies, it's always the upending, So usually it would be more of a tragedy. Or people don't change at all. If they change, it's not at all or long term. Maybe you could track some changes in Tony Soprano or McNulty, over time, but there wasn't this incident that did it, and we got to, by an hour and 40 minutes in the movie, have them shift,
Yeah, and a lot of times the most compelling characters are the ones who refuse to change, like, mentioned Tony Soprano and,
Shakespeare.
As much as they might go through moments of crisis, existential or, just in terms of, their identity or whether they're willing to do certain things, to achieve whatever goal they have. Those kinds of things are are very interesting to us as far as character building and portraits of characters, and
Right.
Just the fact that they always or not always, I won't say anything's always certain, but one of the more fascinating things about human nature is that the identity often just will not shake, and despite the decisions they're faced with, they might have to do things that trouble their sort of internal worldview or what have you, and just watching them butt their heads against that
Right.
is often strikes me as true.
Right. And authentic. And to bring it back to Jack, this movie is a cautionary tale. So many of our favorite stories are cautionary tales. Campfire stories, horror stories are cautionary. And Shakespeare, tragedy is cautionary. Usually, you can kind of delineate it, comedy and tragedy, by epiphany, no epiphany, arc, no arc, ability to overcome their fatal flaw, inability to overcome fatal flaw. So you get these great Shakespearean tragedies like Breaking Bad, where Walter White's sin of pride, the movie that shows all about his pride. He wouldn't take help for the medical bill, so he goes down this road. Then he becomes Heisenberg. It's all pride, pride, pride. He'll poison a kid over it. Spoiler alert. Oops. To get to that point. And by the end, it's his downfall, but it's kind of not, because with the anti-hero, you're like, fuck yeah, they saw it through. You root for Tony Soprano at the same time. So I don't know why big spectacle movies are so afraid of that. If you made just darker, edgier characters, edgier would even substitute for, maybe more introspective character work in one of these big tentpole, set piece spectacle movies. It's like, hopefully we get to that era. You get stuff like Snowpiercer and stuff that comes out that's tonally at least darker, but I don't know. Like, where's the Unforgiven of superhero movies? That'd be fucking awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I concur, because there's so many other Marvel superheroes who I wish they would touch upon, and it's just sort of like I know they're sticking with that couple because they want those. They're the most well known. They you know what I mean. And then you have the whole DC universe and whatever they're doing, which apparently yeah, I didn't see Suicide Squad, but apparently it wasn't that good.
We were total Marvel nerds growing up, for the record. Team Marvel for sure.
But yeah, I agree. I want to see, hopefully they will, eventually, start to shift tonally and, allow that sort of darker storytelling. Maybe, not like you were saying, and for listeners of this podcast, they know I always love talking about nuts and bolts of storytelling. I always love, some people, they love Saved by the Cat and they swear by Saved by the Cat. Some people love, oh God, what the hell's his name? Sid Field. They love Sid Field.
Brian Cox.
Yeah, and they love all of the, the gurus.
Look, man, consume that shit for sure, but we're not religious. We never subscribe to anything, really. So it's like I look at it, all this shit, like Jeet Kune Do. Take what works, get rid of the rest. You know what I mean? There's some good stuff in Blake Snyder. We'll still throw out The Long Dark Night of the Soul and talk about stuff in those terms. But to say, I have to hit my inciting incident on this page, or you have to have this transformative arc, or whatever, just prescriptive shit like that, we don't really subscribe to. And we feel like maybe that book made its way into development circles, and now every development executive's read it, and they think it's the blueprint. So then you get to this point where, maybe writers aren't even necessarily the ones who are always taking that thing to heart, and that being the problem. It's that they start getting noted based on Save the Cat,
Yeah, I agree, guys, and I know, because this is a podcast you can't see, but to my left is my screenwriting and filmmaking library. It's just one big, huge, bookshelf full of every sort of book on the market. Because for the past couple of years, like, I've just put my nose into these books and been like, you know what, I want to see what everyone has to say. I want to see how everyone thinks it should be. I want to hear from everybody. Because you sort of, as you guys know, as you go through different meetings, as you meet different screenwriters and producers, they each have, their different theory about what makes a good movie. They have a different idea of different things.
It's all subjective too. I mean, this is difficult. Like it's trying to put a poem on the Pritchard scale. Like it's different strokes for different folks too. So there's probably not one answer anyway for every audience member. And like Jay said earlier, if you try and please everyone, then maybe there's this formula that would more likely do that. But if you're more interested in it depends what your goals are, in other words, so all the books combined won't have an answer. It's, this book might work better for this audience member.
What's your worldview? What's your voice? What do you have to say?
Yeah. If it turns you on as a creator, hopefully it'll turn a few other people on.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's very true, guys. Jay, Chris, we've been talking for about 55 minutes now. In closing, is there anything that you wanted to sort of say to put a sort of period at the end of this whole conversation?
I mean, obviously, if anyone checks out our Indiegogo, thinks the movie looks awesome, wants to see or hear more, chip in if you can, or at least share it. That's actually had a big effect. There's one buddy of mine who chipped in $25, and I thanked him publicly on Facebook, and an old friend of his saw it and said, you know what, here's $1,000. I'm an associate producer now, which is one of our perks. So just sharing it could have a massive effect and cost you nothing, so hopefully do that. Otherwise, I don't know, man. We just hope. We're not trying to set out to inspire or anything like that. We're just doing our own thing. But it would be cool if a lot of people were just doing their own thing, and we found channels to put that spotlight on each other, to get our work in front of eyes, because that really is what the fight becomes, The reason we make $200 million movies is because it costs like $100 million to market a movie, whether it costs $5 million to make it or $100 million. So I'm not going to spend $100 million to get enough eyes on a $5 million movie. I'm going to spend $200 million. That way I'm spending 50% of my budget on marketing, not 5,000% or whatever, right? So hopefully there's some way. I see there's crowdfunding sites like Seed the Spark, which we'd considered using, but we use Indiegogo for a few reasons. But hopefully this move towards distribution, and then is there some kind of site that can emerge that says this is the new super underground indie movies you want to see this week, or even with a Variety or one of the trades Deadline eventually say these are the super underground micro-budget, grassroots movies to check out, We are in the age of curation, so maybe we're just hoping more of these super indie curators emerge, that movies like ours and the movies we know other people out there are making like ours would have an easier time getting in front of eyes. Of course, there's the festival circuit. We'll do that. We'll use our connections in Hollywood once it's made to try and get it to distributors and such. But a movie like this, we're not going to get any help from within the system to make. It's just too nuclear, basically, thematically, content-wise. So yeah, man, if you guys could help out, that'd be fucking awesome. Otherwise, you can always hit us up on Twitter at themthorntons, TheMthorntons, and www.themthorntons.com is our website, so you can check it out. We've also got prose we're writing, this awesome, crazy lone survivor meets Game of Thrones, kind of Black Ops fantasy, hard fantasy series. We're doing it prose and shit. So we got a lot of stuff going on. Check it out and make cool shit. That's what we say to everyone else. Please make cool shit. We'll check it out as well,
Yeah, we'll consume it.
My next question was going to be where can people find you online? But I will link to everything, by the way, in the show notes, everything we talked about. And I will link to also, of course, our Indiegogo campaign. Everyone, it's DaveBullis.com. Twitter, it's at Dave_Bullis. Jay and Chris Thornton, I wish you the best of luck with Cactus Jack. And, I'm sure our paths will cross sometime soon.
Sure, man. Thanks. You are first. You'll always be our first.
Yeah. All right,
man.
On that note, all right, take care, man.
That's it. Take care, guys.
Later, dude.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.